Well, you've heard the protesters here, and you've heard them make their points in the past. They're worried about unsafe drinking water, explosions. Haven't there been some of these problems in other states with fracking?
With energy development or with any kind of economic activity, there's always going to be an environmental footprint. Airplanes do fall out of the sky. What you need to be concerned about, what Ohio citizens need to be concerned about, is that the proper regulatory process is in place to regulate the industry, to assure the public that they can have faith and trust that this is done properly. Ohio, particularly with Senate Bill 165 last year, that was enacted in the last General Assembly, about a year ago now, advanced the state of Ohio many times over. And this has been proven by peer critiques of outside groups that have come in and said, how do you stack up against the rest of the nation? And they have found that Ohio has a very effective regulatory program, particularly on issues of well construction, which really matter, which is where the accidents have been in other states, and with hydraulic fracturing, which is not a new issue in the state of Ohio. We've been fracturing wells in the state of Ohio since the early 1950s. There's been over 80,000 wells hydraulically fractured in the state of Ohio. It happens on a daily basis in the state of Ohio.
But isn't this new technique even more extreme?
What's changed is that you're drilling horizontal wells now. So what a horizontal well is really 10 wells within one well bore. So on the surface it appears to be bigger, but they're doing what they're avoiding is drilling 10 straight wells to do the same thing, which I would think most people would like. So the resources going down one well bore are more, but remember, it's impacting 10 different sections along a horizontal lateral to give you 10 times the energy production from one site.
So the problems in other states, you're basically dismissing them as faulty regulation that you think Ohio won't have?
I'm not dismissing them. The events that have happened, there was a spill that happened in Bradford County, Pennsylvania just this past week. That's an unfortunate incident, and it shouldn't have happened. But it had to do with management of the equipment on the surface. The regulatory policies need to be in place to avoid those kinds of instances, and when those types of events happen, to analyze what went wrong and then do something to make it not go wrong again, to improve the situation.
Okay. Some of the opponents of this say there's just not enough known about the impacts of this, about pumping the kind of volumes underground, about the what comes out. They want to slow it down. Why not slow down until you can get a more exact idea of what might happen?
You're asking me to slow down 60 years of history. If they say there isn't enough evidence to know what happens to a rock when you hydraulically fracture it at 4,000 feet of depth, then they're not paying attention to history, because history tells you that that has been something that's happened over a long period of time in all the oil and gas producing states, and the evidence, the track record, the overwhelming preponderance of evidence says that what they're claiming is not true.
That's your point about how you've really been doing this in a slightly different form.
Those are the facts. Those are the facts. A 1989 Society of Petroleum Engineers study said that over 1 million wells have been hydraulically fractured in the United States. That was in 1989. Out of that track record, there's 34,000 wells fracked in the United States every year. Every year. With that kind of track record, you would think that the public health menace that they claim exists would emerge as very hardcore evidence. All they can say is, we don't really understand it. They never point to the hard evidence.
What would it mean if there was, as these protesters want, a one-year moratorium on new oil and gas drilling permits using fracking?
What that would mean is that there would be no wells drilled in the state of Ohio. What that would mean is that the $60 million that Ohioans save every year by avoiding interstate transportation costs in order to gain access to local supplies would stop. What it would mean is higher energy prices with no discernible benefits to the environment. What they're really telling you is that they're simply opposed to oil and gas development, and they would prefer that it comes from some other source, and Joe and Betty Buckeye can't afford that kind of vision.
But they're not proposing a one-year moratorium on permits using the old vertical methods or whatever. They're just talking about the horizontal, the newer horizontal.
But that doesn't make sense. Because the fracturing process in the Utica Shale beneath the most common formation, the Clinton Shale, the Clinton Sandstone, is the same process. And what they're saying is, for one type of well it's okay, but for another deeper than the Clinton, it's not. But they give no evidence why you would have that kind of distinction. What they're really alarmed about is that too much natural gas is being produced, and that goes against their vision of the future. That's what they're really worried about.
One other thing that was said today was that 99.5% of lands in the state of Ohio, you can already drill on them. Why do you need the state park sites too?
I don't need the state park site. The state of Ohio needs the state park site. They've got a $500 million shortfall of an inability to keep their properties in place, and they're looking for revenues to do something to help themselves. So they're looking at what happens in Michigan or Pennsylvania or Oklahoma or many other oil and gas states that have public properties and saying, why don't we repeat that model? They've been leasing state lands in the state of Michigan for over 80 years, with building up a trust fund that takes care of their properties and expands recreational opportunities for the citizens of Michigan, which is a big sporting state. It has melded well with the citizens of Michigan to achieve their recreational opportunities and to take care of their properties. So it is true that the preponderance of land in the state of Ohio is privately owned, but the largest landowner is the state of Ohio, and they can't take care of their properties. So this isn't about my industry, because we do have access to large lands. It's about the state of Ohio doing something to help itself and staying off the taxpayer's back.
Okay.